Welcome back to the Puddin' Creek Rod Shop. Now, we ain't got time to be standing around gawking at all the junk on the shelves that needs to be dusted. We've got work to do. Today's the day we're going to sling some black paint on that new X-member that I fabricated for the Bad Coupe. Well, I swept out my paint booth and I wet down the concrete. Oh, and I changed out the intake filters on my paint booth. Now, a lot of guys, they like to go with cheap intake filters, but not your old buddy Puddin' Creek. I like to go with at least a 10 micron filter. I don't want to take any chances of any microscopic specks of dust getting in my paint job. I'm just messing with you guys. I'm painting these parts right out here in Mother Nature. Probably the same way John Lackner painted the original chassis parts back in the early 70s. Now, just for fun, I thought about even digging out my pappy's old 1970s Binks siphon-style spray gun to paint these chassis parts. You know, just to keep the 70s theme going. But I looked around, I've packed it away in a box somewhere, and I can't find it in all this mess. Man, oh man, have we got a lot packed in this video for you guys today. We got to get these parts painted because right now there's a guy on his way here from South Carolina. He's coming to the Puddin' Creek Rod Shop because he's going to buy a set of log cabin steps from me. I know, you just looked over at your wife sitting on the couch and said, did he say log cabin steps? Yeah, I said log cabin steps. Also, the parts are starting to come in for the mini pearl build, so we're going to unbox some of those. The little woman, she'll be here later on to unbox the regular mail, to open the mail you guys are sending in. Also, we've got some comments to address. Seems like another YouTuber wants to make comments on our videos, so we're going to address that later. We're going to do a complete teardown of the transmission that's going in the mini pearl roadster. The one we're getting ready to rebuild, that's all on today's video. And finally, the little woman's going to make some cornbread pancakes. Yeah, you didn't see that coming, did you? Well, guys, here's the log cabin steps we're selling today. These are old growth pine, probably from the 1800s. These were salvaged from a log cabin by one of those barnwood log cabin salvage companies down in Tellico Plains, Tennessee. I bought them at their bankruptcy auction 20 years ago. Evidently, one of the partners was putting a little extra folding money in his billfold that the other one didn't know about. One thing led to another. They defaulted on their payments and ended up in bankruptcy. I went to the bankruptcy auction and I bought this whole truckload of old log cabin steps for $300. Now, I took 6 of the steps out of this pile and built us some front porch steps for our house. When these things are pressure washed and just lightly sanded and then stained, they really make a pretty set of steps. But the rest of the pile's just been sitting around in my way all this time, so I decided to list them on Marketplace. I had no idea what to price them at. I don't know what the going rate for log cabin steps is. So I priced them at $950, and just as soon as I listed them, a guy from South Carolina hit me up on the old messenger, and he said, "I'll take them." And that told me right there I must have priced them too cheap.
Oh, you're doing hot rods?
Hot rods,
people,
yeah.
Or
I
do it?
I buy them, I build them and sell them, and just a little bit of everything.
Oh, that's come on up here. We'll start another. A little cross there.
50 style traditional hot rods.
That's the good stuff.
No computer engines or none of that. All my stuff's got flatheads in it or good nail head old stuff.
You got.
Now, while we were loading up these log cabin steps, this guy hit me with a question. He said, when you're digging around in old barns for old car parts and old cars, do you ever run up on any hand-carved duck decoys? And I said, duck decoys? He said, yeah, duck decoys bring a lot of money. Then he proceeded to tell me that it was nothing at all for a rare duck decoy to bring $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000. And I said, what? He told me that where he was from down in South Carolina, back in the early 20th century, there was a pair of brothers that hand-carved duck decoys on a plantation, and a pair of their duck decoys sold for $1.1 million. Again, I said, what? So the next time I'm digging around in an old barn trying to find a 32 Ford grill or a rare speed part, I'm going to look for duck decoys. Forget the 32 Ford grills. Did you ever notice you can learn something new from everyone you meet as you go through life? It's just like Gene Winfield said, every day's a school day. Cold Fort Worth beer just ain't no good for jealous. I've tried it night after night. You're in someone else's arms in Dallas. Does Fort Worth ever cross your mind? Now, I know my Hot Rod Shop version of that song's not too good. George Strait, he killed it and had the big hit with it. But if you ever get bored sometime, look up Keith Whitley's version of Does Fort Worth Ever Cross Your Mind? That's my favorite version. Now, if you're not up to speed on our previous videos, what I'm unboxing right here is a transmission adapter kit that we're going to use on this black 1928 Ford Roadster that you can see to my right. This is a Roadster that Haley named Mini Pearl, so we're calling this the Mini Pearl Roadster. And we're getting it ready for a wedding. And we're going to update the transmission in it from the stock Model A transmission to a rebuilt 39 Ford transmission that we're going to rebuild. And we're going to use this adapter kit right here to adapt that 39 Ford transmission to the stock Model A engine that's in it that was completely rebuilt and runs like a sewing machine. And eventually we'll hop up that 4-banger engine for a little 4-banger hot rod action, something different. Now you're probably asking yourself, hey Puddin' Creek, how much did that kit cost? Well, it wasn't cheap. It cost $929 plus tax plus shipping. And the next thing you're probably saying is, wow, you just sold those log cabin steps for $950. That will almost pay for the price of the kit. That's right. Just like Willie Nelson says, everything will work out like it's supposed to anyway. This is the bracket to relocate the wishbone. That's where the ball goes right there. Just at first glance, this stuff looks like it's made really well. I'm happy so far. Here's the new clutch shaft. That's the shaft that'll operate the release bearing fork. Now, when I made my first video and explained this transmission swap that we were going to do on the A model, several of you guys emailed me or messaged me on Messenger, and you said that you'd been wanting to do this upgrade to your A model as well, and you were really excited to get to see somebody do it on video that's done it many times before. Well, I had to be honest with you and tell you I've never done this upgrade before, but we'll all learn together. This is just our old rusty, crusty transmission, but let's fit the adapter plate up and see how the holes line up and see how the quality is on this thing. I hope I don't have to re-drill any holes or open any holes up. I hope it just fits. The holes look like they're in the correct spot at first glance, just a quick glance. And the overall machining on this part looks very well done. It doesn't look like Chinese machining. It looks like somebody knew what they were doing, whoever machined it. Now, I do see some nicks in the mounting surface right there, that machine surface. Looks like some of those other parts maybe just banged into that soft aluminum during shipping. No big deal. We'll just flat file that smooth again. I found some more dinged up surfaces, so I decided just to take a few minutes and go over the whole thing and flat file it. I wouldn't call this a quality problem. This is just a shipping thing. It just got a little dinged up in shipping. No big deal. It looks like it's a real good quality part. Now, they sent us a new clutch fork rod in the kit, but they did not send the bronze bushing, so we will have to order the 2 bronze bushings that this shaft rides on. I guess this bracket right here is for the brake pedal to mount on. And looks like it bolts in like this right here, probably after the shifter tower top is bolted on. Then this will go on last. Also in this kit was this bracket right here. And this is kind of the same deal. This will be the bracket so you can reuse your factory A model emergency brake. All right, that's enough unboxing for one day. Let's address some viewer comments. Now, a couple of videos back, I was trying to give you guys some tips on how to positively identify a 1939 Ford transmission if you think you found one in a barn or a field or a swap meet. And somewhere in the video, I said this. But the transmission we want for the Mini Pearl Roadster and the transmission hot rodders have wanted since the late 30s is the 1-year only 1939 Ford transmission. This transmission is desirable because it's the first year that Ford had a synchronized transmission, but they still retained the floor-mounted shifter. It was that phrase right there that got me a couple of comments from you guys. One of you guys commented and said, hey, I had a 37 Ford transmission, and I'm pretty sure it had some kind of a synchronizer in it. And another guy said, I had a 34 Ford transmission, and I could have sworn it had some kind of a synchronizer in it. Well, both those guys were correct. When I said that the 39 was the first year that Ford had a synchronized transmission, I probably should have said it was the first year that Ford had a fully synchronized transmission, or a synchronized transmission that works like a modern transmission. So let's back up and take another swing at it. This is a Model A Ford transmission, and remember, this transmission had straight cut gears and no synchronizers whatsoever. So to downshift, you had to double clutch. Now right here is a next generation transmission, and if you notice this one, it does have synchronizers, but only one on each side of the collar. Not a double row like we'll see right here in a minute on the later transmissions. Now this is the 1939 style gear assembly. This is what you're looking for if you're building a traditional style hot rod. Notice these have 2 rows of synchronizers on each side of the shift collar. This style gear set came in the 1939 Ford passenger cars and in the 1942 through 1950 light-duty pickup trucks. You could also rob this gear set out of a 40 Ford column shift box and move them around and put them in a floor shift box. That works too. All right, let's rewind that video one more time and we'll look at the other thing I said that got me a comment. The other thing I said was this right here. Up until 1939, all the transmissions just had one of these detent screws. But in 1939, they switched to a double detent, 2 of these detent screws. Well, that statement got me this friendly comment from another YouTuber. Mike Ham said this double detent shifter came out in 1938. He said you can have a double detent shifter but have the smaller 2 7/8 shift fork. And then he said I missed the most important stuff like the internals. Well, now in all fairness to Mike, he's commenting on a clip that was on Facebook, not the full video, and this clip did not show where I explained the internals, but you guys that watch the full video know that I explained you need to have a 3-inch shift fork for it to be a 39, and I even showed you how to measure it, and I also gave you the part number. So I did go over the internals, but this was in the full video, not in the little clip that Mike saw. Now, when Mike said the double detent shifter actually came out in 1938, my first thought was 1938 was a transitional year for the transmissions. They were tooling up for the 39, and it's absolutely possible that some of those double detent shifters did come out in 38. Henry Ford was notorious for crossing up years, holding over parts from last year and using them up and not throwing them away or introducing new stuff before the new model year, so that's absolutely possible. But common knowledge among hot rodders is the double detent transmission is the 39. But with Ford cars, nothing's set in stone. So let's dig into that a little bit. Now, I didn't have a 1938 transmission here to look at, so I did the next best thing. I pulled out the industry standard on rebuilding early Ford transmissions, and that's Mac Van Pelt's book. He's known to be the expert on early Ford transmissions, and I just flipped over to see what he had to say about them. Mr. Van Pelt says that Ford used the 81A housing, that's the double detent shift tower or casting or housing, beginning with the 1939 models, the Ford cars, trucks, and the Mercury cars. Now the 8 in 81A, that stands for 1938, and you're saying, aha, Puddin' Creek, you were wrong. Not necessarily. You see, they were designing the parts for the 39-year model in 38. 38 was a transitional year, and so it got the 8 designation. The 81A shift tower was used on the 1939 transmission, and it was continued to be used all the way up through 1950 on the light pickup trucks, but it was designed in 1938. Now, this one is an 81A, but it's not showing up very well. It's not stamped very deep. Let me clean up the other one and show it to you guys. Let's see if we can see it a little better so you guys know what we're looking for when you're out scrounging. It looks like someone was sanding on this one and looking for that part number many years ago. It wasn't me. It was before I got it. But they were looking on the wrong end of the shift tower casting. You need to look on the opposite end. Both of these shift towers that I'm cleaning up and showing you here in this video, they are both double detent shift towers, and they both have the wide shift fork, the 3-inch wide shift fork. So both of these are from 1939 transmissions. All right, let's take a brush and some mineral spirits and clean it up just a little bit and see what we've got here. And there it is. It is a part number 81A-7222 shifter housing. That is a double detent shifter housing that was designed in 1938, and like Mike said, it did make it on some of the 1938 cars. And the transmissions that did make it on would have most likely had the smaller shift fork and a different gear set, the 2 7/8 shift fork. So what you're looking for is a 3-inch wide shift fork, but this same housing, the 81A housing. So let's summarize real quick and then move on. If you're wanting to do the traditional hot rod thing, you're looking for a double detent shifter housing. It should be an 81A part number, and it should have a 3-inch wide shift fork in it, and that is a 91A part number.
She makes good cornbread. She makes good cornbread. She makes good cornbread. It's the best in town.
Good afternoon. We have a few pieces of mail to open. This one is from Ron Raines from Bakersfield, California.
Bakersfield. Home of Buck Owens. Merle Haggard.
Oh, pretty Christmas card. Season's greeting. I enjoy your YouTube show. Thanks for doing real hot rod work. Ron Raines.
All right.
This one is from York in somewhere South Carolina. Hello, I made it old school with pegs. Hope you and the little woman like it. Love you. Charlie York, Red Bluff, South Carolina.
That is a picture frame he made for the piece of rat fink art that Von Franco painted or drew for us.
Oh.
York made us a custom frame for it, but that's really nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's get a close up of that. Yeah, peg construction. I like that. That's really cool. All right, we'll get our rat fink art put in that.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This one is from Michael Russell, Columbia, Missouri. Dear Pudding and Miss Creek, I found this stack of old magazines in my basement and I thought you would enjoy them. Also included is a 1969 one-half J.C. Whitney catalog. You can order all the stuff you will be needing for your 1970s hot rod builds. Just make the check out to me and I'll send it to the return address on the package. I will make sure to get it to the right place. I enjoy your channel even though I am an all original 1930s Chevy guy. Just another sidewinder, bushwhacker, carpetbagger, etc. Michael Russell.
All right. The bushwhackers and the sidewinders are coming through. Hey, that's super cool. It's old. That's back when Motor Trend was interesting. Auto mechanics. Huh. Well, these are really cool.
Street rod.
And custom Street Rod Quarterly, 1971. That's just the era of the Bad Coupe here. Speed Mechanics. These are cool magazines. 1964 Hot Rod magazine. That's cool. The J.C. Whitney catalog. All right. We'll get our order put together and a check and get him right going on it. I bet there's some cool stuff in there. Very cool.
Fun.
Motor Life. All right. And what was his name again?
Mike Russell.
Mike Russell. Thank you, Mike. We really appreciate the magazines. That'll give us more to study up on this winter.
Hope you have a good week. Bye. Thanks.
Got a little woman about 5 feet tall. She sings like an angel, boys, and that ain't all. Whatever she says is the law of the land. She keeps a cast iron skillet in her right hand. She makes good cornbread. She makes good cornbread. She makes good cornbread. It's the best in town. And I like sweet tea. I like the way the little woman loves on me. She loves me in the morning and she loves me at night, but she really gets me going about supper time. She makes good cornbread. She makes good cornbread. She makes good cornbread. It's the best in town. To a big old surprise, she wasn't making no cake, she wasn't making no pies. My eyes bugged out and my mouth was gaping. Didn't have nothing on but her old cooking apron. She makes good cornbread. She makes good cornbread. She makes good cornbread. It's the best in town. She makes good cornbread. She makes good cornbread. She makes good cornbread. It's the best in town. She makes good cornbread. It's the best in town.
Well, let's get these Bad Coupe parts hung up back here out of the way. We'll leave them hanging around and let them harden up good for a while. And in the meantime, we'll go ahead and start tearing down a transmission for the Mini Pearl Roadster. Now, if you're just getting into this hot rod hobby and you just drug an old car home, think twice before you tear it into a million pieces. When they're tore apart, they take up about 3 times as much space as they do put together. As you can see hanging on the nails back through here, I've got Bad Coupe parts spread out like a Sunday dinner. Now, while I'm giving out advice that nobody asked for, here's another little tip. If you're a young guy just getting into this hobby and you need to break apart a rusted up old bolt, before you hit it with a penetrating oil, take just a minute and use a wire brush to clean the rust out of the threads. That rust builds up on the threads and makes them too big for the nut to come down over. So wire brush the threads, get rid of the rust, just takes a second, then hit it with a penetrating oil. And even better, let that penetrating oil set overnight if you have time. This clutch lever had been broke in two at one time. Looks like a forged part, broke in two and welded back together. I mean, what do you got to do to break a clutch lever? They must have run over a chicken too. Now, the first step in tearing down these early Ford transmissions is probably the most aggravating part. You've got to get out this cross pin that goes through the clutch shaft. And the pin's not threaded in, and it's not press fit in, it's swaged in. And what does swaged mean? Swaged means they left it a little long when they installed it, and then took a big giant hammer and beat the head down to lock it into place. I'm going to have to grind that mushroomed head off of that pin before I'll be able to drive the pin out of the shaft, and the smallest grinding pad I have is still too big to go in between the fork. I'm thinking what I'm going to need is a die grinder with a solid carbide burr in it. Now, a burr is the proper name for this tool, although I used to work with an old machinist and he called them rotary files. Of course, you don't want to know what he called a lot of the other machinists. Well, I ran into a big problem. Once you knock the pin down so far, it starts bottoming out against the bell housing case. And if you rotate the clutch fork up to where it doesn't bottom out against the bell housing case, then you can't get the punch back in there to finish driving it out. So I decided to try one of these 90-degree punches. Now hold up on them comments. This is not a good Allen wrench. This is just an old junk one out of the junk bucket. I told you guys this was going to be the most aggravating part of the whole job. Now, there's two bronze bushings in this bell housing case that the clutch shaft rides in, and they feel pretty sloppy. They feel like they're completely worn out, but that doesn't matter. We will press those out and press new bushings in, and this clutch shaft is not even going to be reused. If you remember, there was a brand new clutch shaft in the adapter kit that we just unboxed. We're not going to be rebuilding a transmission in this video. That'll be later on. This is just the teardown. What I need to do is get the transmission all torn apart and get all the parts soaked in kerosene and cleaned up and degreased so I can assess the damage to the parts and see what kind of condition they're in. I have already ordered a new rebuild kit from the early Ford store, and it'll take a few weeks for it to get here. They don't keep that in stock and ready to ship, but they seem to have the best parts in their rebuild kits. So in the meantime, I'll be cleaning all these parts up. Every part doesn't come in the rebuild kit, such as the gears and so forth. So any gears I need to order, that'll be separate. Those clutch bushings will be a separate order. They're not part of the rebuild kit. So that's what I'm going to be doing, is cleaning all this up and evaluating what extra parts I need to order besides the rebuild kit. Also, while we're waiting on parts to come in, we'll completely degrease this transmission case, clean it up real good, probably sandblast it with some coal slag, pressure wash it, and then we'll paint it, and then we'll paint the inside with Gliptol. So we've got a lot of work to do before the parts get here anyway. I'm not ready for that rear bearing to come out just yet, so to hold it in place, I'm just going to stick a 3/8 bolt in there and a couple of flat washers, and that'll come back out in a few minutes. But right now, I want it to stay right where it is. Once you get that old mean, aggravating cross pin out of the clutch shaft, the rest of the disassembly is just gravy work. Now, before we can start to remove any of the gears, we need to drive this counter shaft completely out of the case. This will allow the bottom gear cluster to drop down only about 1/4 of an inch, but that's all we need to disengage the gears and start to remove them. Now, I'm driving this counter shaft out with a brass punch because sometimes they're in there pretty tight and I'll have to beat on it pretty hard, and I don't want to use a steel punch because that'll beat up the end of the shaft. I always keep a couple of sizes of scrap brass around to use for brass punches just for this kind of job. There's one of those little brass synchronizers that cause all the controversy. Now, the next thing we need to do is remove this snap ring, but these snap rings require a special set of snap ring pliers. Now, you can order these from 3rd Gen Automotive. They're a very good supplier for early Ford parts. I use them a lot. If you want to order yourself a set of these pliers, right here's the part number. Now, they're not cheap, but they do work fantastic. Now I'm ready to remove that temporary bolt that I put in and let that rear bearing come out. Now I'm trying to concentrate on disassembling this transmission, but the thoughts that keep flowing through my head is what the little woman's making for supper tonight. She's had a pot of homemade chili, slow cooking all day, just getting right. And when I come in from work, she's going to make us a batch of her cornbread pancakes. Honey hush. Every once in a while, when you're doing mechanic work, you got to break out your finished carpentry tools. Now, you won't see that on Chip Foose's videos. Now we've got to drive out the idler shaft. We drive it out from the rear. And again, I'm using a brass punch so not to mess up the end of the shaft. The next thing I want to do is take a little mineral spirits and clean up these machine bosses at the front and the rear of the case and feel them for grooves, see how rough they are, and see if they're worn out, see if this case is going to be usable as is. If one of them is bad, it's usually this rear boss, or I think Ford calls them a thrust face. I call them a boss, but anyway, it's usually the rear one that's worn out if there's any problems. This one looks pretty good. I see some little grooves, maybe like a record, you know, those kind of grooves, but nothing major, no major damage. I think this will be fine. Now the front one, it looks fantastic. It looks just like it did when it was originally machined in the 1930s. Well, I washed all that grease off my hands, and while they're good and clean, before I go home, I've got one more little job I want to do. Now, Von Franco made us this cool piece of rat fink art and gave it to us as a gift. And Charlie York handmade this picture frame to fit it. He emailed me and got the dimensions and then handmade the frame to fit the piece of artwork. I mean, you guys are just too good to us. You're all the time sending us hot rod magazines and little books and tools and sanding disc and hot rod parts. And like the little woman says, it's not necessary, but we do really appreciate it. When I'm 30 hours deep into editing one of these videos and I'm just completely worn out with it and I'm over it and I just want to cut it short and finish it, and then I think of how good you guys are to us and all the nice comments and how much you guys enjoy the show you tell us, and I'll go ahead and plug in another hour or two and try to put a really good ending on it to make you guys the best video I can for the next Monday. Back when I was still working in the machine shops, there used to be a machine shop tooling salesman that would call on me once a week to see if I needed anything. And he wasn't an insurance salesman, car salesman, pushy kind of salesman. He was a real nice, down-to-earth guy, just wanted to see if there's anything you needed. Before he'd been a machine shop tooling salesman, he'd spent 20 years driving a bread truck, up at 4 o'clock in the morning, loading a bread truck and out making deliveries all day. Just a real good, down-to-earth, common, blue-collar kind of guy. Anyway, every week, once a week, when he'd come through the door, I'd say, "How you doing?" And he'd say, "Better than I deserve." Well, that's what I'm going to start telling you guys when I see you out at a car show or a swap meet and you say, "Puddin' Creek, how you doing?" I'm going to say, "Better than I deserve." Now, I know what you boys are thinking about right now. Look at them cornbread pancakes floating around in that pan full of butter. I tell you what, if the peanut butter milkshakes don't get old pudding, the cornbread pancakes will. Now, boys, she's about to show you how it's done right here. What she's drizzling all over them cornbread pancakes is melted honey and melted butter with red pepper flakes in it. Real honey, not that fake stuff out of the grocery store. Real deal honey out of a bee's rear end. Good googly moogly, look at them pancakes. Well, that's our show for this week, friends and neighbors. We appreciate you stopping by every Monday to see what we're doing. If you want to get yourself a Puddin' Creek t-shirt, just head on over to puddin'creek.com. And as always, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already.